Welcome back to our listeners and viewers of The Responsible Edge, the podcast where we explore the bold ideas, uncomfortable truths, and unexpected solutions shaping the future of ethical business. Today, we're asking, in decentralized, creative organizations where autonomy is prized, how can sustainability efforts be effectively embedded and credibly measured? And to do so, we're going to be reflecting on the article, Addressing Greenwashing, Best Practices for ESG Transparency, a timely breakdown of how to avoid the smoke and mirrors trap in corporate sustainability communications. And joining me today, I'm absolutely delighted to say, is the incredibly dynamic trio from Banijay Entertainment. We've got Edouard Minc, ESG Director. We've got Kate Humphreys, Chief Communications Officer, and Alma Santo, Format Manager and Banijay Green Co-Chair. Guys, thank you so much for joining me collectively from various different places around Europe for this conversation this morning. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Hello. Now, we're going to kick things off. Again, this is different to any other format we've ever done with the show. We've got obviously 3 guests in the room. So keen to obviously introduce each of you and give a bit more of a flavor and a background to your experience and work to date. So Edouard, can I just start with you possibly? Can you just give our listeners and viewers a bit more of a flavor as to your background and your role at Banijay?
Hello, Charlie. So my name is Edouard, as you can probably tell from my accent and French. I've been in Paris all my life, most of my life. And my background is a business school that I did in France, and a master degree that I did in London on media. And I think that media has been driving me since I was very young. I love the media. I love TV. I studied that. I work in media companies. I teach media also at Sciences Po now. So it's very important for me.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you already. What was it about the media as a young person? What was it that you were attracted to? What were you inspired by when it came to, obviously, basing a lot of your career and your passion around it?
I mean, when I was younger, media have always been very important in my family. Journalism, media were very strong in my history. So it was a natural path for me when I was doing my business school and when I was trying to find an interesting master degree after school. So yeah, it was personal habits and family history, but also it's a very interesting industry to work in. It's great. It's vibrant. It's lively. So it's a great business industry. I've been in a press magazine before. I've been a magazine publisher in my previous life for multiple magazines, including Paris Match that you might know. Mm-hmm. I've been at Banijay for almost 6 years now, and at my current position for the past 2 years. That's my background.
Well, that was brilliantly introduced, and obviously you've done a massive disservice to your incredibly deep and powerful career that you've had so far. We'll obviously be linking to your LinkedIn profile so everybody can go and dive into the depths if you like and go and find out a bit more about the things that you've done. But I just want to pick up on, you mentioned this career in the media, you've mentioned the history of working in magazine publications, etc. When did sustainability and ESG kind of become part of your work? Like, how did that evolve in your career?
In my career, probably starting when I was working as a magazine publisher. Mm-hmm. As you of course know, magazines are great, big clients of paper companies. So the first time I probably came across sustainability is on paper usage. So that was 15 years ago, I think. Then many topics added to this one, but that's probably the first time my job description was linked to what sustainability is. 15, 20 years ago.
Interesting. And before then, I mean, you've talked about like the kind of formative experiences that you'd had in terms of your, exposure to the media and to sort of the family based interest that you had in this. Was the environmental issues like part of that as well, or was this very much something that you kind of picked up with that professional role that you've just described?
It's something I picked up on my personal life and professional life, but it was less of a focus of my family 40 years ago. But no, it's very important. And I think that on my personal life, it's something quite important.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing my last interviews at Banijay during the recruitment process, it was the hottest day ever in Paris. So I remember the day of my last two interviews, it was 43 degrees. In Paris, 2 degrees in a city like Paris, it's not very pleasant. And, I have 3 kids. 30 years ago, having 33 degrees in Paris would make everyone laugh. So I think that it's very important that we all do whatever we can in order in 30 years not to have my kids having 53 degrees in Paris. Mm-hmm. Which unfortunately might be a possibility for cities like Paris, London, and main European cities and elsewhere in the world. So yeah, it's a key element for me.
Edouard, is brilliant. I mean, I was literally going to come on to ask you kind of what's the kind of, when you think about your sort of personal ambitions and intentions for the rest of your career, like what does that look like? But you've just beautifully described the most compelling case of having 3 children and wanting to ultimately, try and support the development of a world in the future that allows them to not experience Paris at 53 degrees, which I think is a very, very astute sort of intention. Edouard, I know that was a whistle-stop tour through you and your background, but thank you so much for sharing that. As I mentioned, our listeners and viewers can go and check out Edouard's profile, etc., in the materials provided. Kate, I'm going to come on to you because you're literally sat next to Edouard, so it's easy for me to go across screen this way. Yes, just provide perhaps a bit more background on you and your role at Banijay.
Sure. So I'm Chief Comms Officer. I'm actually based in London. I travel between London and Paris by train and metro, not by car. So one could say that we're very much a borderless community here at Banijay. We work very closely together across borders. So I started similar to Edouard. My education spans through media. I studied media at uni. I then went into the world of communications in an agency at a time where sustainability and ESG were not buzzwords that we were using regularly. I can't think of any communication campaigns that stemmed from a need to respond to ESG kind of demands in the market. We were working on everything from Royal Mail stamps, which still to this day exist, but I don't think that they're particularly sustainable still. You can't reuse a Royal Mail stamp. And then I made my way into television, and there's someone with a state background in terms of education. I had a rude awakening when I came from an agency to TV, in that there was a high proportion of the people I was working with who had come through the private school education system. And suddenly you felt slightly like an alien. Now, thankfully, that has changed since I have been in the industry, having gone through Warner Brothers, having gone through NBC, and having gone now into Banijay, where I think is really much more of a diverse environment now. Over the years, it's changed. I've been fortunate. It's always been inclusive environments, though. So while you might have felt odd and the odd one out, I think it was always still quite inclusive. Again, back then, when I first started at Warner Brothers, ESG wasn't really on the agenda for me in communications, nor for the business that I was operating within. And then at NBC, it was really when I started becoming more aware and recognizing that really we needed to prioritize ESG as part of our communications approach. So there I started to learn more about things like employee resource groups. So we had D&I employee resource groups. We were starting to think more around green in production. Albert Plus was coming in the UK from BAFTA, which obviously brought a sense of urgency to our producers. And they came on board with Albert. So we started seeing an emergence of real kind of a hive of activity and a hive of recognition, I would say, that this has to be front and center of the communication strategy, but primarily internally. So when I joined Banijay 7 years ago and set up the communications department here, there was no comms beforehand.
Wow.
It was something that I wanted to bring to the table. Now, with myself and just one intern at the time, I'm fortunate to be building a team of 6. There was only so much you can do. And I think we were starting to put it on the priority scale. But thankfully, we'll come to it later, but then Edouard took over the helm of ESG and has delivered much more than I could have done with my comms hat on back then.
Well, Kate, this is, and by the way, that was a brilliant introduction. Again, we'll link to Kate's profile so everybody can sort of check out all the rest of the detail around her career today. But what an amazing, had you done that before with any of the organizations that you would work with? I have the kind of blank sheet of paper and gone into an organization and sort of built the comms function as you wanted to. Or was this a completely new experience for you when you joined Banijay?
When I joined Warner Brothers years ago, I was in my early 20s, mid-20s, and I was a lone ranger there. So it was what used to be called shared media that had been recently acquired by Warner Brothers. It was a small portfolio of labels, still kind of approaching production with an independent mindset, even though they were slowly integrating into Warner Brothers. There I was on my own. I had to be quite entrepreneurial. It was primarily focused on publicity though, and corporate comms and a little bit of internal comms. And then at NBC, it was much more defined, the role. So that was much more focused on publicity, corp comms, and events. And so there, while I kind of had a lot of autonomy, it wasn't the same as building something totally from scratch. And you were working within the confines of a US studio system as well, which is a different way of working, let's say. And then only at Banijay, where there was really that kind of entrepreneurial approach within its DNA. We're very pioneering and entrepreneurial and innovative in the way we all work across the business, whether you are a producer, whether you're someone like Alma working in the central creative team, or someone like Edouard working across ESG, we all have kind of that entrepreneurial DNA in our makeup. And we're also given the freedom here and the autonomy to be able to really make our roles what we want them to be, which means that we're given the space to build those roles out. So if I wanted to work on ESG those years ago, I had the freedom to kind of take that on. And the same as how we've evolved the communications team over the years. We built social media platforms, all of those things that you couldn't have imagined doing all those years ago.
And Kate, you're one of the brilliant podcast guests that starts sort of titillating the article that we're going to be discussing in more depth and some of the themes coming out of it. But I just want to ask you one more question on the setup of the sort of the comms function within Banijay as you came in 7 years ago. You've obviously, over the course of your career, had lots of experiences of lots of different departments and functions within different organizations. What were the kind of core and fundamental sort of foundations that you wanted to put in place when you were building the comms function for Banijay from the start? Like, what were those lessons learned over the course of the rest of your career that you were like, when I'm going to make sure that the following is embedded in the way that this function works? I
think, admittedly, a lot of it comes from ambition and a sense of competitiveness. I'm totally honest. So I think each year it's about being better, doing better, being louder. And we did start from somewhat of a blank canvas. Banijay was relatively unknown in the broader international market. It was starting to grow. People were becoming familiar with it, but I don't think it was front and center on the world stage. So we had to build that narrative from scratch. We had to build the trust in the business. And I think trust is something that's key to probably all of our areas that we operate in, building the trust of our stakeholders, building the trust of those outside the business as well. But I think my learnings from previous roles, the main thing is always transparency. In communication, transparency is key. And as a starting point, the transparency internal was the first block. And I think when we come to the greenwashing piece, that's the line that I go down, which is the importance of authenticity in everything you do and transparency. And I think if you are operating in an authentic way internally, then that does navigate externally eventually, but it should never be the priority. So the same with transparency. The key to transparency is the internal piece first. So even in a very basic sense, if we're announcing a piece of news, we need to let our teams know that first internally before we go externally. And the same applies with the ESG narrative, which we'll come to later.
Okay, I'm not going to keep wax lyrical about how much of a brilliant podcast guest you are, but that was sensational. And I have to say, I give out hears on the show for, I think, the guests that absolutely nail particular points. And you're going to get your first hear of the show on that particular remark. Kate, thank you so much for your introduction. As you can guys already see, I am notoriously bad at sticking to anywhere near the timescales that my producers would like me to. So we'll move on now, if possible. And Alma, really, really intrigued to hear a bit more about you and your background and your role at Banijay too, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure, happy to. So I was born and raised in Israel, and like Edouard, also have a background in the family of journalism and production. Actually, TV production. My mom was a TV producer. My grandfather was a journalist and a political cartoonist. So media was very much present in our house. And because of my dad's work, we also traveled and lived in different countries. So I ended up living in Nigeria, in Ecuador, later as an adult in the US for a few years, and moved to Australia. And then finally, I found myself in the Netherlands 14 years ago. And I knew that I'm going to study something to do with this type of industry. So my university study was international communication and media, kind of bringing together this area and also my interest in different cultures and different people. And I was lucky enough to have an internship in a company that kept me around, and I'm still in 10 years later. So I did different things for Banijay, but for the my main role for the last years has been in this central team called Creative Networks, and that is a support function mostly to our producers around the world, but also to some third-party producers we work with, to safeguard our TV shows, our TV formats, we call it, and to make sure they're successful and they travel all over the world. So we, we'll create a show in one country, and then we want it to go everywhere else and be long running.
So Alma, sorry to interrupt you. You're in full flight, but that's absolutely fascinating. So, and I might be butchering this and not understanding it correctly, so feel free to tell me that that's the case. But you're essentially looking at the sort of cultural differences and therefore the ways that shows need to be adapted in order to land in particular areas of the world. Is that what the work entails?
Absolutely. Our creative companies are, in many cases, they would create a show thinking, how can this show have a strong core that would translate and be relevant in different countries? That's a lot of our the kind of our ambition, our strategy, not to make it only relevant to your own markets, but also to other markets. And our team of format managers, that's my role, in format consultants, who are essentially creative and experienced producers, are supporting remotely and also by traveling, by going to the productions, to make sure that these are translatable to different cultures, to different sentiments, to different people that we cast for our shows, making it the most relevant and successful locally. Yeah,
you're essentially out there as a diplomat. You're a diplomatic sort of media representative. I love it. And Alma, just talk a little bit about your role as Green co-chair. Just touch on that for us as well.
Yeah, it's actually more of kind of a passion project. I do it alongside my role, and it brings I feel like it brings a lot of value to my day-to-day job. I started kind of being exposed to sustainability in terms of TV production a few years ago. I was tasked with doing a deep dive into the food waste management on a little show you might know called MasterChef. Who's currently active in 35 different countries. And in the UK, I believe this is the 20th anniversary this year. So a big scale show, and obviously very, very important to make sure that you don't only behind the scenes are responsible with all the ingredients, all the food that you're using, not to be wasteful, but also kind of bringing across that message. So I investigated the different countries that are producing MasterChef, what they're doing to kind of collect best practices and spread around the world. And I found it both inspiring and incredibly powerful. And since then, I've been kind of getting across that message to our producers around the world, making sure there's awareness of what we're doing, what the possibilities are. And I'm really, really passionate about it. And then a couple of years ago, with the help of Kate and her team, we've established this internal employee group called Banijay Green. So that's like-minded employees that just signed up to be part of this group. And discuss things on a regular basis. And it's not only producers, it's also people in the creative teams, people in legal, in HR. It doesn't matter. If you're an employee at Banijay and you're interested, you're very welcome. We meet monthly, we discuss things, we organize events. So that's something I'm really, really passionate about.
And that's awesome. And it lends itself so well. And Alma, by the way, brilliant introduction. And again, we'll link to your LinkedIn so people can check out your history as well in a bit more depth. But it comes back to Kate's point about starting with that internal piece and getting that internal piece right when it comes to ESG communications. I mean, you can't get more than setting up a voluntary network like Banijay Green in order to facilitate that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Guys, let's move forward now, if possible. I'm going to come back to you, Edouard, if it's okay here. Would you mind just providing our listeners with a bit of a summary of the article? I think it was titled "Addressing Greenwashing: Best Practices for ESG Transparency in the USA." Would you mind just providing a bit of an overview of that piece and then just picking out whatever you thought were the particularly interesting points from it?
Yeah. So, Charlie, I think it was a very good choice of article because this article really sits in between what we do, all three of us, Kate, Alma, and me. It has links and connections to all three jobs. Greenwashing is, for me, linked to the very core of the evolution of ESG and the evolution of what the pressure is on the company from all stakeholders that we might have us at Banijay, but other companies will have similar stakeholders and pressure from the stakeholders. Greenwashing is like a consequence of what the pressure from all stakeholders can be. I think it's a wrong answer to what can be the pressure about green, about sustainability on a company. It's a wrong answer, but it's an answer that we very often see and experience, and not just in our industry, but globally in many, many industries. So I think it's very interesting for us to be far from that. And I think that Kate will talk a lot about the link between greenwashing and communication and what we want to do. But what I wanted to say is that we have all main stakeholders, and the pressure that we have can be governments, regulation, or internal employees, NGOs, and clients, of course. We are in TV production in a B2B sector. We provide ideas, creativity, and production to our clients, and we deliver to them shows, all types of shows in many, many different countries. So we have a lot of pressure from them, which is normal. It's a healthy relationship. But that position as a B2B business, in fact, is also a way for us not to fall into what greenwashing could be, because we are not, and we were talking a lot about media because we all love media. We provide content to media. We are not a media company. We are a content company, and we provide content to media companies. And we'll talk more about the link between sustainability and content, I think, going further in this with you. But this is very important for us to make sure that we don't fall into that communication trap of watching, and that our clients, our partners, the broadcasters and the platform in the world, don't do the same with our content as well.
Well, that was brilliantly introduced, and there were some fascinating points there. This whole notion of pressure and the squeeze that every kind of stakeholder feels, I think, is such a well-made point, and is so applicable to certainly all the conversations that we have with signatories of the Charter, etc., and partners that we work with. Let me ask you, in terms of, because you've sort of gone into this area, in terms of greenwashing in the kind of media space, if you like. What's your sort of analysis of the state of play? Because obviously we have, I know even the article alluded to it. We have kind of greenwashing's evil cousin, the notion of green hushing, the notion of shutting up shop, if you like, when it comes to our sustainability communications for fear of greenwashing. Like, how is that playing out in the media world at the moment?
So this one,
I can answer that one.
Anyone, let's go for it, Kay.
I think that we saw a few years ago, and I think Black Lives Matter on the S side of the ESG really had an impact, and you saw back then an influx of washing, obviously not green, but washing behaviour, and I think so many brands came under fire during that period. You had makeup brands making posts on social media to get behind the movement, but yet their makeup lines didn't adhere to a diversity of people. And I think the greenwashing is kind of the next wave of that. And for me, in recent years, you had a lot of companies invest in ESG across the board, new initiatives, lots of trainee schemes, you name it. The US studios were investing in it. Given the the political backdrop right now, but we've seen a bit of a shift in the past many months since someone came to power. And we are now taking a moment, I think, as an industry to reflect on what that means and how we, as a specific international business, can still deliver in this space and deliver smartly and responsibly and with kind of gearing positive change. And I think while there's change happening around us, as a business, we continue to deliver and deliver authentically and with tangible initiatives and tangible communication internally and externally.
Okay, that's so brilliantly described and rings so true to, I think, and I'm going to butcher this and make it seem oversimplified from what you've just very eloquently positioned, but it's that sense of like a collective pause is going on where a lot of organizations are saying, no, we're not carrying on implementing, our ESG initiatives, reporting, monitoring, and all of the great stuff that we're doing. But in terms of the geopolitical landscape that we find ourselves in and the degree of scrutiny, if you like, that all communications comes under, let's just take a moment to just really think about how we're going to be positioning ourselves from a comms perspective moving forward. Have I just described what you've just described in much more simple terms, or is there anything in what I've just said that isn't your lived experience?
Well, I think there are ways to draw comparisons between the kind of communication approach and what Alma's doing in a way. Because we have always tailored our content, for instance, to different territories, different cultures, different societies, different scenarios, what Big Brother might look like in the UK at any given time. It might not look the same in other territories, and the discussions might not be the same. So I think there's always been sensitivity within this business around being culturally appropriate and sensitive to local needs and local audiences' needs. So I think it's really approaching all of this with the same lens and through the same lens, that what one initiative might work in the UK might not work in the US right now, and an initiative that works in Germany right now might not work in Spain. It's always been the same with our content. So I think the way that we approach ESG has to be the same. It has to be sensitive to whether it's market conditions, economic conditions, political conditions. I think we approach it with the same, in the same respect.
And does that lend itself? Okay, and again, Alma, I'm going to come on to you because you've obviously got a lot of experience in this kind of multi sort of faceted, very different sort of realities in terms of different jurisdictions around the world and how therefore these sorts of things land. But Kate, just coming back to that point, do you think that the kind of decentralized nature of the way that a company like Banijay approaches both its ESG function, but equally its kind of creativity and comms function, is that essential to facilitate what you've just described?
Totally. I think we have around the way the makeup of the company is, just to give a bit of context there. So we operate across 23 territories, primarily in production distribution, but now we're in live entertainment, live events and experiences. Across that footprint in major territories, we have what we call country CEOs with their own back office, which includes comms. And then beneath that, their production portfolios. So that could be everything from a kind of a one label strategy to a 27 label strategy. So, but what's important there is the country CEOs or the single label head are the wizards, let's say, of that local territory. They know the market, they know the clients, they know the political environment. They know the news agendas. So for us, they're the gatekeepers for those territories, and they're best placed to help and support us with global rollout of initiative, news flow, all of those things. But while we sit in a group role and we sit as advisors ourselves, day in, day out, there are advisors too, and making sure that anything we land in those territories lands well and lands effectively. It's
that kind of that sort of communication channel flow from global lead to jurisdiction and vice versa, and making sure that that's sort of interconnected. Edouard / Alma, I want to ask you guys a question about, in light of that, like let's get into some examples of the realities of the differences in the way that sustainability communications, ESG communications land in different jurisdictions around the world. Like, what are the nuances, the sorts of nuances that are at play? Can you just describe some examples for us?
I can start very, very quickly, and then Alma can be more precise than me. In terms of organization, the ESG department at group level, it's 2 persons, 2 people. And we work, as Kate said, with 23 countries, and the organization of ESG within these countries vary a lot from one country to another. Okay. We have representative, ESG representative, or ESG ambassadors, whatever you want to call them. In 2 countries, it's a dedicated role, like mine. In the other 23 countries, it's always people who have another job. Sometimes it's linked to communication, sometimes it's HR, sometimes it's more content related, sometimes it's production. We have a lot of different situations, which in a way also illustrate that ESG adapts to the local situation, but also to the local organizations of our company. So we have group initiatives that we work with everyone, and we'll probably talk more about that later. And sustainability is among these. We also have a lot of initiatives that we propose to the countries. And then we discuss with them how to implement these initiatives, if they are interested, not interested, how we can tune and fine-tune what we want to do in order to make it, as Kate said, relevant everywhere, because we are not a top-down company. We are driven by our labels and driven by our countries. So it's an open discussion going up and down and from countries to another all the time.
And brilliantly described, Edouard. But let me ask you, you mentioned that two of the territories have got sort of sustainability, full-time sustainability leads, if you like, working within them.
Yep.
What's the reasoning behind why they have a full-time lead and the other jurisdictions don't? What's the thinking there?
It's choices that the CEOs of these countries made. It depends. It really depends on local situation, and I don't think there's a lesson to be learned on where they have a position and where they don't. Because it's even all the people who are working as ESG ambassadors, even though it's not for most of them the core of their job description, it begins to be a big part of that. So it's really based on the way they want you to structure their own organization.
And
I think I can add to that, actually. In some cases, I think obviously the market it's very dependent how mature the market in this area. So in the UK, as you know, well, I don't know, what's your perspective? Our perspective is that the UK is actually quite mature in the way that they treat sustainability, at least in the media industry. And so, for example, in the UK, we don't have necessarily ESG responsible, but we do have it embedded in the productions and throughout the business. It's kind of something that they've been across and doing for years, while in other countries, it's maybe just starting. So they need someone to spearhead and kind of try to build. What does that look for us? How are we introducing into the different parts of the business? So I think that's also part of it.
It's super interesting, Alba, and I wanted to pick up on that with you because I think when you've spoken about Banijay Green before, or sorry, is it Green Banijay or Banijay Green?
Banijay Green.
Banijay Green, sorry, yeah, should have picked up on that. But just talk me through kind of, we always talk, a common theme on the show is we talk about like the need for sustainability to become a culturally embedded activity that is sort of considered and part of everyone's role within the organization, because that kind of awareness, if you like, is what then drives the kind of empathy and compassion for one another's roles and different departments, etc., that can then lead to the kind of innovation and change that's required. Out of interest, just talk us through like the thinking behind Banijay Green and like how you guys are sort of reaching out and engaging with other organizations and other people within the organization as a whole.
So we kind of opened that group up for, like I said, anyone that wants to join. Some months we have lots of people on those calls, sometimes less. It's really it's people come because they're interested in that. We do try to make them kind of join with different initiatives. So we organize some events that are around sustainability, but they're not necessarily something like a task, something that you feel obligated to join. It should be inspiring. It should be fun and kind of a look behind the curtain. So, for example, we would bring either internal or external speakers to talk about their newest project that they're doing. This, one of our production companies, a documentary production company, told us about this beautiful environmental documentary they're working on right now. So it's a sneak peek before it's even public knowledge. So that's kind of how we draw people in. And then some of them are actually, this is part of their day-to-day job. So they come to kind of pick up tips and what's the next thing that we are going to do locally. Oh, this country did an amazing campaign around collecting e-waste. We can do that too. That's really easy. So, we kind of making those connections is very important in order to kind of keep these activities going and kind of make them spread around our companies.
Alma, that's a really interesting point. Like, you guys have got access to that kind of content that's there to inspire hearts and minds, and the fact that you're aware of and utilizing that content in that way in order to have an influence on things internally is awesome and great to hear. Big kind of question. I always like asking organizations such as yours, which obviously, you guys are doing lots of great stuff, and you've talked about the brilliant work that you're doing, Edouard, and Alma, the Banijay Green and all the brilliant stuff that you guys are doing there. No organization is truly sustainable. We all know that. There isn't one that exists. So in light of that, like, what are the areas for growth and for opportunity for development for a company like Banijay? Like, what are the, in 5, 10, 15 years time, what are going to be the things that you look back on and you go, wow, look how we're doing this, so differently, so much better than we were doing it before? Like, what do those sorts of things look like?
I think that a lot of things have changed within the company in the past 3 years regarding sustainability. We started to partner 3 years ago with a company called 3 Degrees, and it's a company that have helped us do something which is quite complicated, which is calculate our carbon footprint. We have a lot of different offices. We produce hundreds of shows. It's complicated for a company as decentralized also as us to calculate that. We are a big company made of a lot of small and medium creative labels. So it was a challenging task. So we started to do that 2 years ago. We have been calculating our carbon footprint for the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we published it for the first time in Banijay Group URD in March. So that's the first step. The second step that we are currently doing now, which is even more complicated, is to build our decarbonization strategy. Mm-hmm. The way it's complex to do calculation, but it's just a calculation. It doesn't mean that we need to do what we do differently. Mm-hmm. The decarbonization, it's hard to say. Strategy is a challenge because it means being able to continue to do our job, which is creating and producing, but to do it in a more sustainable way. And we have to do it for many different reasons. We have to do it because it's now an obligation with the CSRD and the Paris Agreement. We have to do it because it's also a pressure from our clients. As you know, when you calculate your footprint, you calculate the scope 1 linked to fuel, the scope 2 linked to electricity, and the scope 3, which is linked to suppliers. We are the suppliers of our clients. So for them to match the target that they have published, we need to reduce what we provide them, what we sell them to, in order for them to broadcast our shows. So we have also huge pressure there, and that's a huge challenge of what we need to do. You were saying that there's no sustainable organization. It's true. In terms of regulation, it doesn't change anything because, in fact, you have to take where you were a few years ago and bring it down for 2030 and then bring it to net zero for 2050. So in a way, if you're not sustainable at all, or if you're already very mature, it doesn't change much because you still have to reduce the footprint that any organization has. So that's what we are doing. And I believe strongly that we are doing everything not just because we have pressures, but because I don't want to have Paris with 53 degrees, because it's a responsibility that we have as a company. That's what ESG is about. In a changing world, and we as a company need to prepare the company for that changing world. So it applies to social evolution. It applies to all the governance topics, but it applies to sustainability. So it's what we have to do. It's our responsibility to our viewers, to our employees as a company.
Edouard, that was brilliant. You've clearly given us our title for today's show, which is Let's Stop Paris Getting to 53 Degrees or something akin to that. So thank you for that. You're a titling magician here. Let me ask you, Kate, I want to come to you with one more question about kind of comms. It kind of falls off the back of what Edouard has just described. When it comes to kind of the corporate communications of Banijay, and your obviously, you mentioned about the need for the kind of authenticity in the way that the company communicates, and presumably that actually as a decentralized organization that actually want the different jurisdictions to take on a degree of autonomy when they're creating their content. How do you go about kind of playing that balancing act between sort of allowing everybody off the leash in order to be creative and to produce the campaigns and the messaging that they think is appropriate for their jurisdiction, and making sure that we still don't fall into the trap, if you like, of greenwashing or perhaps even green hushing? How do you sort of balance those two requirements?
So I think firstly, there's a lot of collaboration going on within this footprint. You've heard from the three of us just today, and you can hear from all three voices, we're all playing our own part.
Yeah.
We're just three voices within this huge organization, and there are lots of people playing their part. So whether it's Alma and the Creative Networks team who are facilitating the format Bibles and making sure we have green Bibles in place and that they're managing the productions, that's initiative driven to some extent. Or whether it's our legal team who are putting into place strict policies around welfare and duty of care and kind of the safeguarding policies for us, or whether it's Edouard who's setting the strategy at the top and delivering the measurement and delivering the onward strategy from there, or whether it's our team in Spain who are putting into place a D&I partnership to bring new talent into the company, or a guy called Benjamin in France who has a partnership with Cannes University to put into action a diploma to bring new creative individuals into this environment and this business. Or whether it's the team in the US who have various kind of initiatives at play. And in the UK, we have a Bright Bulb scheme to bring in interns to diversify our workforce there. There's so many initiatives, and that's not to mention across our HQ, we have, we brought in a bookshelf, a simple library in each of our territories, which has reading materials across ESG, and all the various different areas of social. It also includes children's books. So we encourage employees to take those home to educate the next generation. So there's so many initiatives coming from so many different teams. We also have the employee resource groups, which are global. So Alma, like she mentioned, is co-chair of Green. We also have a parents group. We also have Embrace, which is a diversity group, which sits primarily in the UK. We have umbrellas of Banijay Well and Banijay Disability. We have Pride. All of those are in partnership with comms, driving out internal events. We do Banijay Meet. So we've got the World Ocean Day. We've got a producer who used to work with Attenborough coming to talk to us. For the parents group, we've had actors come in and speak to the team. We also will promote all the productions that are happening that lean into these things and bringing those conversations to the table. And that's all in collaboration with our network. While comms at a group level, we initiate all these global online events. At a local level, they've got their own communication campaigns around those initiatives. But what I'll finish on is the most important thing is authenticity. I'll come back to it again. All of these initiatives and those policies are there to safeguard us, right? To avoid the worst case scenarios. Authentically, we're communicating internally. It's very initiative driven and subject driven internally. Externally, I'm not just putting people on stages just to talk about green and ESG and how wonderful we are. They go to stages to talk about this business at large. And yes, a part of that is how seriously we take our responsibility. Mm-hmm. And they will to that. But it's not that we're trying to paint a picture of this business that we're leading the charge in ESG. It's that we take our responsibility seriously, and these are some of the things that we're doing.
Okay, you're going to get your second here of the show. I think that was absolutely perfectly positioned. And I completely agree with you on this notion of authenticity. I think for me, authenticity is all from a comms perspective. And again, I'm happy to bow to your much greater experience in this than I, but it's almost like authenticity is when you stick to your position on something, even in the face of difficulty. That's what that then becomes authentic communication, because it's very easy for us all to position ourselves in one particular way when, the breeze is light and the sun's out and everything's shining. But it's much harder to say, do you know what? The geopolitical landscape at the moment is seeing this huge backlash when it comes to DEI, but we're not only going to not continue to commit to our programs of DEI, but actually we're going to communicate even more confidently about why this is important to us as an organization. To me, that's authenticity in comms. I don't know, Alma, have you got a comment to that? Or Kate, do you want to come back to me and tell me that I've got it completely wrong? Do you want to?
I'd agree to that. I just think it sits with your values as a business. And I think if you have authentic values and those values stem your business and stem the people that work within it, the authenticity comes quite naturally. And I think we are, as a business, quite strong in our values, the entrepreneurialism, the pioneering approach, the innovation. And I think innovation particularly really runs into ESG. I think it is part of innovating as a business. While it's not always tech focused, let's say, innovation sits at the very heart of what we're talking about today.
Which again, coming back to Alma's point about how do you utilize, the media that you have access to in order to inspire the minds and the hearts to think innovatively about how to address some of these problems, both as an organization and through the shows and the content that you help produce. I'm getting the full picture, I think, here, guys. I'm loving it. Alma, you've not had a chance to jump in and comment on any of the sort of final sort of questions we've had here. Anything else you'd like to say on these sort of subjects?
Yeah, I think the Kate mentioned the values. I think it's very important to us to kind of make those clear in the way that we make our shows. Behind the scenes, making sure that things are done in a responsible way, but also kind of using this amazing power that we have to reach so many people. I mentioned MasterChef before as one of our biggest shows. We've got Big Brother as well as Survivor. Those shows have been produced in Survivor in 50 countries, MasterChef and Big Brother, both, each of them in 70 countries to date. So we really have a huge international reach, and there's been so many things that you can see on screen. You don't even maybe notice it, but we are trying to educate and bring across positive messaging to people. So whether it's Big Brother having the set built from recycled materials in the UK, in India, in Finland, they live in a house, they're 24/7 there. So we have in the kitchen recycle, waste bins to kind of show that this is a normal part of your life that you just do. There's nothing to it. We've got MasterChef is really one of the most amazing examples that we have, because the responsible kind of sourcing of food, using the food, the ingredients to the best way that you can, zero waste cooking, what we call it, using local produce. All those things are very authentically related to cooking, and a lot of celebrity chefs that come on the show, they really want to bring across that message that's part of their values as well. And we see that in a very beautiful way embedded in the different challenges that people get, and the different conversations that we see there. And I think this is really something that we feel very strongly about. We do have some shows that are even specifically on the topic of sustainability. You may recall the brilliant show Shop Well for Less. We've done Shop Well for the Planet as well in the UK, and that has now been produced in Germany as well. So so this kind of bringing these positive messaging in our shows is very important. And last thing I wanted to add that we didn't really get to, I think Kate, you did mention the Bibles that we have. Who don't know the industry, Format Bible is really the how to make a show. So it's a very big document, and it has anything from how to cast people, how to make a budget, how to make a schedule, and also the format elements. What's very important to have in the show to make it successful. So in those Bibles, we also have welfare guides. So how do you make sure that the people that you have on the show, our participants, but also our crews, are being taken care of from the very first stage of before the production, during the recording, and even after. A lot of those people, they come as anonymous, and then they become celebrities. So we are there to support them. That's very important to us. And the green guide, of course, which is kind of basic, how to get started, what do you need to do, what are the areas to focus on to make sure you are as responsible as possible off screen, and also some examples from the different shows we did of how did people bring those messages on screen. And that's something that we support with consultancy and kind of trying to make that relevant for the different countries in the way that makes sense for them.
I just wanted to add to what Alma said, and I think it's very, very important. We are not a company like other types of company. I mean, a sector, like other types of sector. We bring content to screens, which means that, in fact, in our ESG strategy, there is this off-screen strategy. I was talking about carbon measurement and all the initiative that Kate was talking about. But we also have that on-screen strategy. With the hundreds of millions of people who watch through broadcasters and streamers our shows, we have a responsibility there. And what Alma was talking about sustainability is also something that we try to push on D&I topics. We have a responsibility there. It's not always the topic of the content, but it has to be included in the content in order to educate, to train, to explain, to give examples in a soft way, an indirect way. And that's very, very important.
Here, Edouard. You're going to get another here from me. I think you're absolutely spot on. The role that certainly the media that we engage with, the role that plays in terms of influencing both our thinking and our passions, enthusiasms, and ultimately our behaviors is crucial. Guys, we've whistle-stop toured through talking about some of the themes in the article and obviously talking about the great work that you guys are doing at Banijay. I'd like to conclude now by asking for each of your magic wand usages. So I'll ask the question, then I'll come to you, Edouard, first. If I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I talked about how our carbon measurement is linked to our clients. In fact, we report the same tons of carbon in the number that we report. So the decarbonization process that we are working on has to be done hand in hand with our clients. And it will be the only way to be really efficient. So there are a lot of partners that we have and clients that we have that are working closely with us on that topic, but not everywhere and not everyone. So I think that type of collaboration is key and will be the driver to successfully reduce our footprint.
You're going to get another here. I think that's absolutely spot on. I have to admit, the omnibus earlier this year slightly unnerved me when it came to realizing that magic wand solution, but let's hope it doesn't have quite the impact that we concern ourselves with. Kate, your magic wand usage?
I think for me, it's about honoring values and effectively honoring values. I think as a content powerhouse that produces 17,000 hours of content a year, we take our responsibility seriously. And we communicate authentically based on a real tangible narrative and real tangible initiatives. And I think it would be good to see the rest of the industry always honouring those values. And I think something we failed to mention earlier, Alma was talking about the format Bibles. They're also put into action by our distribution team. So outside of the footprint where we produce, our shows are produced, so MasterChef, Survivor, if it's rolled into a territory where we don't have production footprint, those same format Bibles are still honoured by those producers and should be. And we're really fortunate as well to have Kathy Payne running our distribution team who really stands by our values. And if producers who don't sit within our footprint, who aren't under the same kind of regulation that our producers are, if they don't honour those format Bibles and they don't honour the kind of integrity and values of those shows, action is often taken. And I think that is a symbol that we really, really do lean into our values and deliver responsibly and in partnership with those who maybe don't sit in the business.
I'm with you. So sorry, Kate, just to clarify exactly what your magic wand will do. Sorry, I didn't quite pick up on what you'd like to do.
It's that companies would honour their values and deliver an authentic message and be truly responsible rather than washing.
The end of washing. Alma, go on, your magic wand.
Well, my utopia is that sustainable practices are just the way we do things in society, that it's not a big deal anymore and there's no real needs to communicate about it anymore. I love this example that I heard before about from, you may recall, this American sitcom Cheers that was set around a bar. There was a lot of drinking involved, and they kind of normalized the term designated driver. It wasn't really a thing before, and now we look at, there is no driving and drinking. That's not something that we do. So, it's about this show really normalized a good behavior that now is normal. So I think, if this is something that we can contribute to in our way, that would be brilliant. And then, hopefully there's no need to communicate so much anymore about it.
Love it. Great suggestion. Brilliant suggestions, all three of you. Thank you guys so much for joining me this morning for a show of The Responsible Edge. It's been great to have you all on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big, big thank you to the Banijay entertainment team, including Edouard, Minc, Kate Humphreys, and Alma Santo, for showing us how decentralized creativity can become a proving ground for ESG integrity, not its loophole. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by the Andrew Greenwash Charter, championing responsible sustainability communications. Visit andrewgreenwashcharter.org to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.